You can now subscribe and save 20% every time you get your Strava Craft coffee sent straight to your door. That's right. Sign up and have it sent to your door every 2, 3, 6, or 8 weeks and get 20% off every single time. You won't have to worry about that panic you have in the morning when you go into the pantry and you're out of coffee and then you got to, put on some sweats and go down to Starbucks or wherever you get your coffee. No. Just get that Strava Craft coffee sent straight to your door on that interval that it takes for you to use up a bag of coffee and save money every time. It is an absolute no-brainer. If you haven't had the rich CBD-infused Strava Craft coffee, why don't you try it now? Just use that code DNVR20. You can try it once and see if you end up wanting to have it sent straight to your door. So check them out, StravaCraftCoffee.com, and get in on that DNVR20 promo code or subscribe and save 20% off every single time.
Number one for the one and only DNVR. 2 goes out to Zach, Mace, RK, and the bar. 3 for Mr. B in that old trophy case. Number 4 we're still waiting for. Well, bring on the chase. Out on the field, a mile high, Broncos win is our desire. Couple with a breakfast crew and a friend bleed orange and blue till the bitter end. Come and join us at DNVR. We are DNVR.
Oh boy. Wow. There is a lot to digest from that one, Zach. Welcome into the DNVR Broncos podcast presented by MSU Denver Online. MSUdenver.edu/online. That's the website. That's how you check out all they have to offer. 40 plus online and hybrid programs and 750 total classes. So you can learn anything you want. Heck, Zach, they might even offer a class in catching footballs. I don't know, but 750 classes. There might be something out there for some people who might need help with that. But check them out, msudenver.edu/online. Rigorous and affordable programs taught by professors who bring the real world into the classroom. And MSU Denver graduates and should I say attendees work twice as many hours as any other institution in Colorado. So if you're looking to get that degree while working full-time, MSU Denver is your place.
Ryan, a class in teaching passes, a class in winning, because the Broncos went up against the team that needs that class the most, and they failed harder than that team today. And it was just everything pretty much went wrong today, Ryan. This was, for it being a close loss, there are so many areas to point the finger at.
Yeah, Zach, and we'll start with our biggest takeaways. And I hate to start here, but it's the biggest thing on everyone's mind. Jerry Jeudy had the game from hell. I was talking to D-Line and Henry, who are here watching the game at the bar after the tailgate, and I told them, I said, Jerry Jeudy is one big play away from having the worst and best game of his career on the same day. Because his stats, if you look away from everything, you'd say, oh, that's a pretty darn good game for Jerry Jeudy. I think he's had one better than them. I think he yardage-wise, he's had one better game. But he should have probably had, Zach, over 150 yards and a touchdown. And I totally understand the frustration of Broncos fans. It was one after another, after another, after another, after another, after another. 5 drops from Jerry Jeudy in the game, with the worst, of course, being one that would have absolutely put the Broncos in field goal range at the very end of the game. So, unfortunately, my biggest takeaway from this game is that Jerry Jeudy left the best game of his career out there on the field and also left the game out there on the field. And it hurts. It hurts to say.
Not 1, not 2, not 3. I mean, it's hard to believe that he had 5 drops, Ryan. That's the most in the NFL this season for a wide receiver. And it's the most for a wide receiver since, I think, 2015, according to ESPN stats and information. And that was when he had 4. And then he added the big one on top of it. And I mean, How sweet would it have been for Jerry Jeudy to just overcome that huge hurdle of 4 drops if he catches that last one, either runs it in for a touchdown and Broncos win, or at least sets up the game tying field goal. Broncos go into overtime. Then it's not on them if they win or lose, or then it's not on him if they end up losing that game. But just a brutal, brutal day. And after the game, Ryan, Vic Fangio actually said this could be a career-defining moment for Jerry Jeudy. See how he comes out in practice this week. See how he performs next week. And Ryan, you can't talk about Jerry Jeudy today without talking about everything that's gone on the past, month of this season, because not only has Jerry Jeudy had 4 catches in the last 4 games entering today, 4 in the last 4 games, but of course he's had the tweets about conditioning. There's been some more cryptic tweets that people have read into, and that certainly doesn't look good on a day when you have 5 drop passes. And this was finally the first game where you can't say, oh, the opportunity wasn't there for Jerry. 15 targets. 15 targets. The opportunity was certainly there.
It was there, and he had a great opportunity to have an insane game. And, he could have been on Twitter right now talking about all the haters who doubted him, and he could have had the game-winning catch. He could have had 4 drops and the game-winning catch and still been able to, probably defend himself if he needed to. I don't know what he can possibly say at this point other than I'm sorry, because that was just unacceptable. Now, it's not all on him, of course. The offense was anemic the entire day. Drew Lock wasn't good enough. Vic Fangio had some questionable decisions, I thought, and we'll talk about the end of the game here in a second. The defense broke at the worst possible moment after they had been playing great for the entire second half. So I'm not saying, put the entire loss on Jerry Jeudy's shoulders, but I guess what I am saying is maybe deactivate Twitter for a few weeks and just because unfortunately, I hate this stuff. I hate when the fans pile on to a guy. And now he's a bust, which I think is absolutely absurd, and this, that, and the other. But you invite that when you act a fool on social media. You can't have it both ways. So I understand why the fans are frustrated. I understand why they expect more from a guy who's going to act like that. I also disagree with anyone who thinks that Jerry Jeudy is a bust at this point. Emphatically, I disagree with them. So there's always layers and there's always nuance. But he talked a big game, and whatever the opposite of backing it up is what happened today.
Yeah, exactly. And Ryan, my biggest concern that goes beyond this game is Drew Lock and Jerry Jeudy. Because at first, it's like, it's just, a rookie wide receiver and a young quarterback not getting on the same page. But this is really, really bad. And the expectations that Jerry Jeudy had coming into this year, what Drew Lock, how much Jerry Jeudy could help Drew Lock. And those guys have only hurt each other this year. And it's crazy. I mean, their completion percentage is like 40% right now. That's concerning and alarming moving forward, especially with only 1 game left in the season. Unless Jerry Jeudy comes out next week, has 10 catches on 12 targets, and we're talking about what a great bounce back for both of those guys. They're on the same page. This is going to be a question going into next year if the Broncos do stick with Drew Lock, because I imagine they're going to stick with Jerry Jeudy. So that's kind of the big takeaway from this game is, holy cow, like what is truly wrong with Drew Lock and Jerry Jeudy? Because it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't. One thing I will say is I liked that Drew kept going back to him and kept going back to him and kept going back to him. Our friend Vic Lombardi used an analogy of like being on the golf course with the driver. Like if you hit a bad drive, some people do. Most people don't just say like, all right, I'm done with the driver today. You hit it on the next tee and you try and fix it. And this is my tinfoil hat-ish theory as to what's been going on recently. For a while, Jerry Jeudy hasn't been getting targeted. And there's a small part of me, that thinks that Drew Lock doesn't trust him. And, if these things are happening in practice, which we obviously don't know if they are, It's hard for a quarterback to trust a receiver in those big spots. And, Drew Lock gets crushed every single week when the film comes out and Jerry Jeudy was wide open and he didn't throw it to him. There's part of me that thinks Drew doesn't trust him. Then the next step of the tinfoil hat theory is someone got in Drew's ear this week and said, hey, look, man, throw him the rock. He's our first round pick. He's upset. We got to get him the ball. So just force feed him. So Drew today said, fine. And I mean, you know why guys normally don't have 5 drops in a game, Zach?
Because once they get 2 drops, they don't get the ball thrown their way.
Exactly. I would bet with a lot of money that no Peyton Manning receiver ever had 5 drops in a game, because as soon as they had 2, they were effectively dead to him. So I kind of like the fact that Drew started going back to him and kept giving him opportunities. Although then you go down another path, which is like, is this the leaving your starting pitcher on the hill while he's getting shelled and you're hurting his confidence long term? I don't know, but I liked that Drew kept giving him opportunities, and Jerry's one play away from redeeming himself in this game, and he would have gone over 100 yards, and it would have been awesome. But unfortunately, it didn't happen, and they're going to have to work on that chemistry. If Drew is the quarterback moving forward, we'll obviously have that conversation here in a second as to where that happened. Zach, aside from Jerry, what's your biggest takeaway from this one?
Just, speaking of just how things were never going right, that very last drive that the Broncos had, Ryan, those 2 first pass plays just kind of summed up the Broncos offense to me on the day. The first one, Drew has Deshaun Hamilton wide open in what would have been a perfect play to start off the drive, and he just totally misses him. It wasn't all on Jerry today. Now, when we talk about things other than Jerry, Drew has to be in this conversation. To me, he certainly wasn't good enough to win this game. Did he have things go against him that weren't his fault? Absolutely he did, but he also didn't overcome them. He played, I think he took a little step back again, a little one, not a huge one, but so that play, and then you have the next play where Jerry Jeudy has a drop. Those 2 plays right there just sum up the Broncos offense for me. So a big takeaway is we're talking about this offense just not clicking all game. And yet it was still a 3-point game near the end of the game because the defense, until they needed them the most, Ryan, they were tremendous with, Parnell Motley in there saving touchdowns and keeping the Broncos in the game. Vic Fangio benching one of his cornerbacks, and turns out to be the right move for the team. And the defense, without Bradley Chubb, without their 2 starting cornerbacks, Shelby Harris is a beast, and this defense it really shuts down Justin Herbert for the most part compared to what Justin Herbert's been doing. And then at the very, very end, instead of bending, they break. And that's just the story of the 2020 Broncos, and especially this game. Man, the defense was great until they needed them the most, but I'm not putting this on them. If you hold the team to 19 points, you should absolutely win the game.
Yes, you should. And that leads me to, I guess, probably the most important conversation, Zach, because this game, we said from the jump, don't win. And it was all playing out as if I had foreseen it, because I was like, oh my God, they're going to come back. They're going to win the game. They're going to beat the Raiders next week. They're going to go 7-9, and they're going to get second place in the division and the 17th overall pick. And it will feel like we just worked, a 60-hour week and got paid $0 for it. So thankfully, in a weird way, it didn't work out like that. I think we might look back later and say, well, it's a good thing that Jerry Jeudy dropped that pass. Yeah. But I know no one wants to hear about that right now. The question is, the best case scenario, in my opinion, for this game was Broncos lose, Drew Lock plays well. As most things normally do, it somehow fell right in the middle. How do you come away? Where did the Drew Lock meter move for you today? Did it move?
It didn't really move. If I had to sway it one way or the other, it probably would have been a little step back because, Ryan, we've seen Drew Lock come alive in the fourth quarter before, so I wasn't surprised to see that happen, especially against a Chargers team that likes to charger. I do think I throw that in the equation here. But he just, I know that Jerry Jeudy dropped that touchdown. And what was that, the third quarter? Was that the first half where it hit both of his hands? That was a really good throw. But
I think that was the fourth quarter. It was a long fourth quarter.
Wow, that was a long fourth quarter. But still, you got to be able to overcome those plays and actually get in the end zone before the fourth quarter. So just he didn't look like, the Justin Herbert who goes out there today and doesn't have the best game ever, but he still makes the plays that are needed and puts up the most passing touchdowns for a rookie quarterback in the history of the NFL. I mean, just what we're looking at, Ryan, Drew Lock can be a good quarterback, but just the consistency I haven't seen. And I don't know how you don't look around the room and say, oh my gosh, there's a Patrick Mahomes in the division for the next 10 years. There's a Justin Herbert in the division for the next decade as well. How can you not want to see more and more consistency? And that's just where I'm, and obviously the expectation level has to be fair. You can't expect the next Justin Herbert. So where do you draw that line? And so to me today, looking at all of that, a little step back from Drew, even though he wasn't terrible today.
No. And, people absolutely killed me for this for the last time I did it. So I'm not going to do it this time because I don't really feel like bringing that energy into my life. But I bet you if you went through and just re-added the Jerry Jeudy drops Drew Lock stat line, you come away with something pretty darn good. Over 300 yards for maybe the first time all year. Would that be right?
It could be because he didn't have 300 against the Panthers.
So, another touchdown. Obviously, you're not holding that second interception against him, although it will be in his stats at the end of the season. It would look a whole lot different. But for me, it's the meter was flat. Just like the Broncos offensive energy meter for the first three quarters. You'll love the fourth quarter juice. You love to see him lead him back down there. You love to see the dimes that he threw. The most impressive one to me is the throw on the run to Noah Fant that put them into field goal range to tie up the game. Thought that was incredible. People talk about, well, he doesn't show those elite flashes. I see them. That was an elite flash. Unfortunately, there were multiple other elite flashes that ended in Jerry Jeudy drops. The throw to Jerry Jeudy in the back of the end zone is as good of a throw as you'll ever see from anyone. It was in a perfect spot. The throw to Jerry Jeudy at the end of the game was an absolute dime. 50 yards down the field through the air?
Yep.
So the elite flashes were there today, which you do love to see. Unfortunately, there's just so much meh in there. And, the one thing that just he can't get rid of is the just understand the situation thing. Like it's a 3-0 game, Drew. You're down by 3. It's third down. You're comfortably in field goal range. You don't need to be special. Just be smart. And the funny thing is when I watch the replay, I'm not as mad about the decision as I am the throw. Decision was like a 6 out of 10. The throw was like a 2 out of 10. The decision, he was open. There was a spot for him to put that ball. The problem is you got to drop it down and you're going one way, trying to move your body back the other way. The decision wasn't as bad as I originally thought, but the situational awareness is. And you can't put the ball in harm's way there. And so if you don't have a clear way to throw that pass, don't throw it. It's 3-3. You look back just like you could after the KC game and say, well, those 3 points sure would have come in handy later. Now, so would the 3 points that Brandon McManus missed when he had 2 opportunities at it. So again, there's always plenty of places to point the finger.
Yeah, and as Pastor Rhett chimes in with the great point, says, as is tradition, Drew Lock indiscriminately feeds both haters and stands alike. What a king. And it's true. If you don't like Drew Lock, you can point to plenty of things in this game. If you do like Drew Lock, you can point to plenty of things. in this game as well. And that's just, it's a tough place to be in the NFL because great quarterbacks, Ryan, they rarely feed the bad crowd. And Drew is young. And the Broncos now, Ryan, I think in 1 game from now, 1 week from right now, are going to be in this position where if you like Drew, you're going to say you're going to be able to make the excuses. If you don't like Drew, you're going to be able to point to things where he isn't the guy. And that's kind of the worst place to be. As we said at the beginning of this season, we said this season is all about finding out what Drew Lock is. At the end of this season, it really looks like we're going to be saying, what is Drew Lock? Who is he right now? And so it's a tough spot to be in, but not everything on him or on the offense was on him today. But that first interception, Ryan, it is so killer because that was just the play that happened a couple of weeks ago in Kansas City. Just 3 days ago, he was talking to us about how those are the plays that he can't make. Those are the plays that he's gotten better at over the past 2 weeks because he didn't have a pick in the past 2 weeks. Now he had a fumble in both of those games, but not an interception. We were encouraged by what we were seeing. And then just one bad pass in this game that does that really takes away from not only his stats, but also the game. Who knows what happens if the Broncos make it there? Maybe they're going into overtime. Maybe they win. Maybe Justin Herbert doesn't have a chance at the end there.
Yeah, man, just frustrating. All right, I want to go through a couple decisions with you. Let's work backwards, starting at the end. 67-yard field goal or 50-yard Hail Mary? What do you prefer?
I think you have a better chance at the 67-yard field goal.
I do too, especially when Deontay Spencer is the one down there.
That's the one thing that I did not like, or I really didn't like about Jerry. Why isn't Jerry Jeudy out there? I mean, I know he's not like a 6'6" master that can pluck the ball out of the air, but get him in. I know he just had a drop, but get him in there.
Yeah, could you imagine though if like he dropped the Hail Mary?
That would have been something. And PFF actually credited Jerry with 7 drops on the day, so somewhere between 5 and 7. Yikes.
If it's 7, that could be close to a record. I mean, just Deontay Spencer, like definitely, like it was Noah Fan out there. I mean, I don't know.
And of course, their receiver Mike Williams gets the pick. Of course,
like 7 feet in the air above Deontay Spencer's head. I just think you have to try the 67-yard. I don't know what. I mean, maybe they have someone who knows the analytics on these things. Knowing the Broncos, I kind of doubt it. But I would just expect you have a higher chance of making a 67-yard field goal. What I will say is they said during the broadcast that Brandon McManus was struggling in warmups. And usually they base what the decisions they're going to make off of what you were doing in warmups. So I would venture to guess that Brandon McManus didn't make any 67-yard field goals in warmups. And with that in mind, I'm not going to crush Vic Fangio for that decision, but not the one I would have made.
Yeah, certainly not, especially with guys like Deontay Spencer in there. I'm letting Brandon try. And you know what? He might have been struggling, but how often does he kick a 67-yard field goal? Never. So I just would have given him a chance. Unless Vic was thinking, let's go with the one that has the worst odds, because as we found out this morning, Vic's coming back next year. Might as well get a better draft pick, Ryan.
There was a moment in there, and I want to talk about this other situation, where I wondered if there was something like that going on. Now, this decision ended up working out kind of. You could make a case both ways. It's kind of like any Drew Lock argument. This was, how much time was left? 6 minutes, 7 minutes?
Yep.
4th and 7, I believe, from around the 40-yard line. I'm ballparking a lot of things here, but I think I'm generally right. I didn't write it down. Broncos take the field goal. It was a 52-yarder, so I guess it was actually a little bit closer than that. They're on the 35. And Brandon McManus makes it. At that point, it makes it a 10-point game from a 13-point game, right? Or was it a 16-point game to a 13-point game? No, it's 13-10.
Yep.
So 2-score game to a 2-score game. At the time, I really, really disagreed with it because I didn't expect the defense to go out there and dig their heels in the way they did. So credit to them. But if you do end up converting that, like you did on the very next drive, you converted a 4th and 7 that you needed. Then obviously your chances of winning this football game go up, especially if the defense, continues to be that strong. So Zach, what did you think of that one?
I would kick the field goal like Vic did, just because, Ryan, I didn't even think about it until I saw your tweet come across. So for me, it was easy. It was just take the points. There's enough time left. But I totally see your side, because it's a 2-possession game where you don't need like 2 extra. It wasn't a 16-point game where you needed 2 touchdowns and 2-point conversions on top of it. So what are you really doing differently here? But I would have kicked the field goal because there was enough time left, I thought.
Yes, and that was proven out to be correct, right? You were able to tie the game up now. You gave them the ball back when you tied the game up. But again, if your defense makes one more stop, you probably win the game. So it ended up being correct. And it's one of those times where I look and say, okay, sometimes they know what they're doing, even when I don't think they do. And they get paid a lot more than I do. So I'm sorry. I think that was one of those times where I'm like, okay, that actually bore itself out. They made the right decision. They tied the game up. They could have taken the lead if they were able to, punch one of those in. But anyways, that was the other one. And I'm trying to think if there was another decision that I wanted to discuss. I don't think so. So man, I get the frustration from fans. I think everyone needs to give Jerry Jeudy just a little bit of a break as a rookie. I know that's hard now, but maybe, tomorrow or something, you'll look back and say, hey, let's give Jerry Jeudy a chance, because he's open for a reason. That's why the ball keeps going his way.
Ryan, do you agree with Vic that this could be a career-defining moment for him? Because Vic didn't say that after the game, after Jerry Jeudy had caught a 75-yard touchdown pass to win the game for the Broncos, and, easily saying that was a career-defining moment. He said it when the career-defining moment is still out there to be had. I mean, if Jerry Jeudy comes out next week and has 1 catch on 3 targets with 2 drops for 7 yards, the question could be easily posed to Vic and say, was that career defining? I mean, did Jerry Jeudy just end his career right here? Did he end? Should we be talking about bust? I mean, do you agree with how high the stakes are that Vic put out there?
I think what Vic was saying is that this can be a turning point for him, where he realizes, I'm not letting this happen again, and he makes changes. And I don't know, you've probably seen me looking down a couple of times here. I've been searching for an old story that I wrote about Noah Fant. And I'm about to tweet this out if you guys want to go read it. But it's a conversation I actually had with Noah Fant's mom the day after he was drafted. And she told me about a turning point in Noah Fant's career at Iowa. And unsurprisingly, as I set this up, he had a drop. It was in overtime. They were down 7. They needed a touchdown to tie the game. It was 4th and 3. Got a perfect ball on him, and he dropped it. And he cost his team the game. And, as his mom told the story, he was damn near inconsolable after the game. In tears, just felt like he'd let those down around him who worked just as hard as he did. And, as she described it, she said, he picked himself up. He went and talked to the media, which Jerry Jeudy did do today. And he made that a turning point. He never wanted to feel that way again. And Zach, it's different in college, but let me look here. Right after that game, he scored a touchdown against Minnesota. The next game, he had 2 touchdowns against Ohio State. The next game, he had another touchdown against Purdue. And then the next game after that, he had 116 yards and 2 touchdowns. And the last game after that, he scored another touchdown. So he scored a touchdown in every single game to finish the season after that drop that cost his team the game. And that's when Noah Fant became the Noah Fant that we know now. That's when everyone started talking about him as a first-round prospect, dominant tight end, all those things. And so, like I said, this is the pros. It's not college. But those things stick with you. And that clearly was a career-defining moment for Noah Fant. So Jerry Jeudy, maybe he should go talk to Noah Fant about what he did after that game and how he was able to turn that into a positive in the overarching arc of his career. And I think that's kind of what Vic Fangio is pointing at, is does Jerry Jeudy look at this and say, I'm never letting this happen again? And does he actually make that happen?
Right, exactly. And one thing that you like is all of his teammates, supported him on the sidelines after his first, second, third, fourth drop of the game. And Jeudy also doesn't have a big issue with his hands. I mean, he hasn't had that throughout his career entering this year. So, Ryan, this is a mental thing. Can he get it corrected? And can he get it, short-term corrected for next week? I would do exactly what the Broncos did to start the first half today and to start the second half. They got the ball to they got the ball to Jerry Jeudy on the first play of both halves. I would do that again next week. And maybe you don't have to target him 15 times in case there's a repeat of this. But, get him 7 targets and see if he can haul 5 of them in. Because if you're going to roll with Drew Lock too, you don't just need Jerry Jeudy to feel confident. You need Drew Lock to feel confident in him and Jerry Jeudy to feel confident in Drew Lock just because of how messed up their chemistry has been this year.
Yeah, keep forcing that chemistry. Jerry Jeudy, might I recommend a Breck brew for your sorrows? Breck brew, always there when you need it. And they've got so many different great beers, including probably the most beautiful can in history, the Broncos Country Hoppy Pale Ale. They got that old school logo on there. It's extremely sexy. They've also got the Mile High City Copper Lager, which is now back in season with the Nuggets back on the floor. They've got the Avalanche Amber Ale. They've got almost all the bases covered. Just need to get the Rockies in there. But they also have all the bases covered when it comes to your favorite beer. Whatever your favorite beer is, try Breck Brew's version of that beer, and I just about guarantee you won't be disappointed.
Oh, and since we're talking about Jerry Jeudy, Ryan, he just bought his mom a house this past week, announced it on Twitter, and I hope he called our friends Mike and Virginia Chevalier over at Chevalier Mortgage to get her set up with a mortgage, or he may have just paid it off. But if you need help with a mortgage, make sure to give our friends Mike and Virginia Chevalier a call. They're not only diehard Broncos fans and proud CSU alums. Say it with me, Ryan. Go Rams.
Never.
They have supported DNVR for a long time as DNVR members. They're a husband-wife team with over 15 years of financial services experience. So give them a visit at DNVRmortgage.com and enter to win a free DNVR shirt or hat of your choice when you do. And most importantly, get set up with a free consultation to discuss all of your options. And if you want to refinance because you see those rates are so good, well, give them a call, because they won't just tell you how good the rates are, but they'll look at your entire financial picture in order to get you set up in the best way possible. Mike is a certified financial planner, so he looks at everything when doing this. So give them a check at DNVRmortgage.com or call Virginia directly at 303-257-6578. Check them out, DNVRmortgage.com. Michael Chevalier, NMLS 1931006. Virginia Chevalier, NMLS 1910631.
All right, Zach. Well, we touched a little bit on who's to blame for this loss, but let's rank them because we can do that here. So give me your top 3 reasons, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a person. But your top 3 reasons why the Denver Broncos lost today.
Jerry Jeudy, man, I hate to just pick on one guy, but Ryan, we talked about it. It could be a historic game for how many drops he had and how brutal it was. And there was a chance for him to save it all and turn that career-defining moment around in this game itself. So unfortunately, going with him. The second one, Ryan, is Brandon McManus. I mean, boy, he came up big when you needed the 50-plus yarders at the end of the game. But when you have an opportunity to kick a field goal after you missed one because the other team jumps off sides and you miss that one and you're a kicker coming back, and man, Tom McMahon said he never wants to coach a game without Brandon McManus again. He let the team down today out there, and he wasn't good in pregame, according to the broadcast. They showed a couple of his missed kicks as well. So I'm going him number 2, a guy we haven't talked about. And then 3, just the offense in general. 16 points, should never get it done. The Broncos should not have won the game. And I'm not going to put anything on the defensive side here, because 19 points, you should win any single game, especially going up against a rookie who's statistically having one of the best rookie seasons of all time. And they really, really limited him today. So 16 points goes on the entire offense.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. The offense as a whole bears a lot of the blame, and I might just put that as number one because it's encapsulating, but then I might run out of other people to blame. I guess Tom McMahon probably deserves a big heap of blame. His special teams units, whether you want to point to Brandon McManus today, and I realize that's not really Tom McMahon's fault that Brandon McManus missed that field goal, but you're the boss and you're responsible for your employees. So that wasn't good. The coverage wasn't good. Obviously, they start the game on the wrong foot and basically just hand the Chargers 3 points right off the bat. Those are the type of things you just can't have happen. So, it's offense. It's Tom McMahon. And then I don't know where to go if I encapsulated, so much in the offense. But if, Jerry Jeudy obviously deserves some part of the blame here today. I don't like doing it because, again, I don't like saying things that people turn into fodder for the overreaction, right? Look, I said it once, but I'm going to say it again. Jerry Jeudy is at fault for why the Broncos lost today. Jerry Jeudy is not a bust. Those two things are worlds apart, and Jerry Jeudy having severe drop issues right now, very obviously, and Jerry Jeudy being a bust are very, very far apart. So I feel uncomfortable saying that and putting blame on Jerry Jeudy where it obviously belongs, because people will take that and turn it into, oh, Jerry Judy's a bust. Even the media is saying it. Jerry Jeudy is not a bust, but he has a lot of work to do. And like I just said, about Noah Fant, hopefully this can be a turning point for Jerry Jeudy. And we have a turning point here on the show because we have our guy, Andrew Mason. Let's bring him in. Mace, what's up?
Hey, you know what? I just came in on the tail end of that, but I'm glad you brought up Noah Fant from last year because so much about this game sort of reminded me of what Noah Fant endured in that Kansas City game last year. And I expect there'll be a turning point for him. Yeah, everyone has every right to be frustrated with this, but the fact that people are sitting here and calling him a bust, one game left in his rookie season, honestly, that's farcical. He had a really bad day. He had a day the likes of which he's never had, and I expect he will not have a day like this again.
I think you're completely right. It'll be tough for him to have a day like this again. But, and I also referenced, and I just tweeted it out, a story that I wrote about Noah Fant, Mace, about how he had a drop when he was in college at Iowa. That was a really big turning point in his career. And he talked about it the day after he was drafted. His mom talked about it the day after he was drafted. He scored 7 touchdowns in the 5 games after that drop. So obviously, Jerry Jeudy doesn't have 5 games left in this season, but maybe he can go out next week and just, be more focused on the football. Clearly there's a disconnect between his eyes and his hands. That's how drops happen. Mm-hmm. It's a very simple thing to fix. It's merely just focus. I think today, you'd think that after it happens once, twice, you start thinking about it a lot more. Like you would think your focus would be at an all-time high. I think that, he knows that he's run his mouth a little bit recently. Mm-hmm. He had the drop. Then he's like, okay, well, the next time I get the ball, I'm scoring a touchdown. And that causes another drop. And then at some point, you just get the yips. Literally, there can just be times where your brain and your body is just not on the same page. I think that's what happened. He had a case of the yips.
Yeah, you are a golfer. You know all about. I hope you haven't had the yips as a golfer, but any golfer knows what that. Yeah, if you play golf long enough, you know what it feels like, and we see it in baseball sometimes as well. They would call it Steve Blast disease back in the day. Chuck Knobloch had an issue. These are strictly mental things. Mackie Sasser is another name a Mets fan might know. These are strictly mental things. Some of those guys, in baseball, it's one of those things you don't see guys get over. In football, the drops in particular, the mental part, that is something you do see a lot of guys overcome. Like I mentioned in the story that I wrote over on DNVR.com, of course, earlier this week, there's a history, even with the Broncos, just focusing on guys that Zach Azzani has worked with, of guys who have dramatically improved their drop rates from year 1 to year 2 and on into year 3. And even with a game like this, I expect Jerry Jeudy is going to have a similar improvement with for starters, having an off season that's just going to be normal. And the other thing that I was encouraged by as far as Jeudy, and also Drew, this factors in Drew Lock, is Drew going up and talking to him and actually giving him some encouraging words on the sideline. I mean, that's what you want your quarterback to do. And Drew kind of being self-deprecating about it, saying, hey, if anybody knows was in position to hang his head this year, it's me, because based on some of the stuff that's going on, but you can't do that. And it really said a lot that Drew kept throwing to him, that they're, and Drew kind of, he alluded to this when he was talking, but Drew talked about how, hey, one play can turn that around. And I wonder if that last deep shot to Jerry Jeudy in some way, obviously he was open, had a chance, but also was a little bit of, okay, man, if Jerry can catch this ball, everything else goes away today. We have a chance to go in overtime, and everything else vanishes. I mean, we've seen Demaryius Thomas have days like that, right? Where he was dropping everything, and then all of a sudden he makes the one big catch. That game against the Patriots back in 2015 comes to mind. Unfortunately for Jerry and Drew, didn't work out. That became the fifth drop. Boy, that was really a tough one to watch.
Well, and that could even start higher up, not just with Drew, but Pat Shurmur saying, for weeks we've been saying how we need to get the ball to Jerry Jeudy. Now we're going to do it. I don't care if he has 4 drops. We're going to go back to him. Drew, on this last play or one of these last plays of the game, Jerry Judy's your number one option. It's a deep pass and throw it to him. So they're just really trying. And you know what? If that's the case, it's smart. The Broncos are 5-10, worst place in the AFC West right now. You're not playing for the playoffs. You got to start playing for next year. And what does that mean? It means getting your young players on the same page, and no one is on different pages more than Drew Lock and Jerry Jeudy. So if that was not just coincidence, I think it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, Mace, I want to get more from you about what people said after the game. But first, you asked me about whether I ever had the yips. I had the shanks, which is a little bit different than the yips, but a similar thing where there's somehow a disconnect between what your brain wants your body to do and what your body's doing. Scariest thing that's legitimately ever happened to me in my sporting life. I was convinced I would never hit a golf ball clean again. It was terrifying. Like 3 straight full buckets, only shanks. I couldn't sleep that night. Anyways, I had blisters on my hands because I just figured the more I swing, eventually I'll figure this out.
Okay, I got to ask you something really quick. For people trying to picture it, did this look like the scene in Tin Cup where Roy McAvoy, he's at the driving range prior to the U.S. Open, and all of a sudden he's trying to get over the shanks, and Romeo tells him to take your tee and put it behind your ear and turn your hat backwards, and all of a sudden he can hit it straight. He's like, well, because you weren't thinking. Your brain was getting in the way.
100%. In fact, like to a T, that's exactly what happened. I was preparing for regionals in high school. So I was at golf practice. Like my coach was there and everything. And he was just like, there's nothing I can tell you, but if you normally carry your golf balls in your right pocket, switch them to your left pocket, take your wallet out, do anything, just change something and see if it works. The next day I went back and they were gone. So I was lucky in that regard. So hopefully that's what happens for Jerry Jeudy. The segue I was getting to is there's one place where you won't have the shanks, and that is WGT. Now you might just suck at the game. But once you're good, you won't just randomly get a case of the shanks. I feel confident in saying that. And I think you still have a few more minutes here on the Ho-Ho Hole-in-One Challenge at Erin Hills Golf Course. What you do is you go to DNVRgolf.com, you download the download the WGT app, you go in to the country club section and join the DNVR 4 Country Club, go into club tournaments, and you'll see the Ho-Ho Hole-in-One Challenge, where you can play and get in on all the fun. And when you play, you instantly get entered to win a prize, which is a DNVR hat or shirt of your choice. And this is the last time to get in for the grand prize. So if you play today, right now, you'll have a chance to get into the grand prize drawing, which is, I've seen what it is, and it's pretty sick. So make sure you go to DNVRgolf.com and download the WGT app.
If you've been hit in the mouth by a shank on the golf course, I have the place for you to go, and that is Green Mountain Dental. And we've had several of our DNVR listeners switch over to Green Mountain Dental over the years, and they have the exact same feedback every single time. They say they treat them just like family. And that's because they are our family over at DNVR. Green Mountain Dental will treat you like family. And if you schedule a cleaning, x-ray, and exam, you'll receive a free Sonicare toothbrush. And when you go, make sure to tweet us so that we know you're now part of their family as well. The Sonicare toothbrush are the best in the world. And all you have to do is take care of your teeth in order for them to hand over a free Sonicare toothbrush. Our director of sales, Lindsay, went to Green Mountain Dental earlier this year, and the dentist called her personally a couple of days later. That is the family service that they deliver, and they will do that for you as well. They're only a 15-minute drive from downtown Denver, so make sure to give them a call next time you get hit with a shank or you just need your teeth cleaned. Make sure to schedule that cleaning, x-ray, and exam, and you'll get that free Sonicare toothbrush.
All right, quickly, we got to get to our king of the game presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. And, this guy, he thrives in week 16, week 17, seems every year. If the Broncos are ever in a playoff hunt, he could be extremely valuable. It is Deshaun Hamilton, your king of the game, 5 receptions, 77 yards, some sweet contested catches, 15.4 yards per catch. Should have had a touchdown. Which I'm sure Drew Lock would have liked because then it would have been in his passing line instead of his rushing line. But the Broncos will take the touchdowns however they can get them. But really an awesome game for Deshaun Hamilton. And like I said, guys, something about those week 17, week 16 games really seem to bring the best out in him.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt about that. I mean, I think the past 2 years he's averaged 1,000-yard season in the last 4 games of the season. He may do that again if he has a big game next week. Just incredible. And how about that last catch that he had? And would that just be the most Chargers thing ever if the Broncos end up winning that game after that catch? Not only was it a drop pick, but it was Chris Harris Jr. who had that ball bounce up, and then Deshaun comes up with that amazing catch for the first down to give the Broncos a shot. Whether it should have been a field goal or a Hail Mary, they had a shot there on the final play. But Deshaun Hamilton, I mean, he just came out of nowhere and then led the Broncos in receiving today.
And you know what? He might have that opportunity next week because we're going to see. It looks like KJ Hamler's going through the concussion protocol, and he didn't come back after taking that hit early. So if he doesn't make it through, Zach, I think we're going to see a lot of Deshaun Hamilton. We could be talking about him being the king of next week's game if he plays as often as he did today. Very possible.
Very possible. All right, Mace. It looked like Jerry Jeudy talked to the media. What did he have to say after the game?
Well, he just, first of all, I mean, I mentioned it on Twitter as well, but you have to tip the cap to him and Broncos PR for making sure he was available, but tip the cap to him for saying yes to talking. That is what pros do, is they talk even when they have bad days. And I mean, he didn't have a lot to say, understandably so. I mean, he did have the comment where he said, hey, he's never had a game like that in his life. He's never experienced anything like that. He said he said he watched the ball come in, he dropped it. That's he mentioned that a couple of times, which is interesting because you hear the cliche, oh, I took my eye off the ball. Jerry wasn't saying anything like that. He's saying, yeah, I saw the ball come in, I looked it in. Even said on one play, I was looking at it in slow motion in my mind and just couldn't bring it in. This is the sort of thing that RK may lead to what you're saying, being kind of mental, really, really here and there. And so that was sort of the theme of it. I think he was a little bit baffled. I think he probably feels like, hey, I'm doing all the right things. I'm doing what I'm coached to do. Why wasn't I able to make this grab? And this is something he's going to have to get past. So that was kind of thing that he focused on. He said, look, I can't dwell on it. Just got to focus on the little detail. I need to focus on, get better, work on my craft. That's really all you can do if you're Jerry Jeudy right now.
I think the mental part of this goes way beyond this game, way beyond this 4-game stretch entering into today where he only had 4 catches in those games. I think this could go all the way back to when Courtland Sutton got hurt. And he realizes, okay, I should be the number 1 receiver on this team right now. Look, they got guys like, they have a 2nd-round pick in KJ Hamler. I'm a 1st-round pick. I should be better than him. Courtland Sutton was supposed to be the guy. Now he's hurt. Okay, they have Noah Fant, but he's not a receiver. And then they have guys like Deshaun Hamilton, Mr. Week 16. They got Tim Patrick, who I should be better than. And maybe just got in his head because obviously this season has not gone as planned. And now he may be pressing. He may be pressing, and the team is certainly pressing to get him the ball. And Drew Lock is now pressing to get him the ball with 15 targets. And it's just all adding on top of each other for just a huge mental gymnastics game that he's playing in there. And clearly it's not landing.
I hurt for Jerry right now. Like, that is a terrible feeling. Because like you said, Mace, he thought he was doing the right things. And I do think that is like a case of the yips, where literally your brain and your hands are off by one tick, and it doesn't feel right. The fact that you said he saw the ball coming in slow motion, to me, is actually a negative thing. Why? Because it's like you want it to get there, like you're like, come on, like, get to me. And it feels like it's taking forever to get to you. And on that last one, it actually looked like he closed his hands a little early before the ball got there. And I think that's just like you're so ready to finally make the play that it just feels like it's taking forever for the ball to get to you. And you just jump the gun a little bit with your hands. I hurt for him because no one wants to be that, his Twitter mentions are probably an absolute disaster, with people embarrassing themselves right now, saying, horrible things to a rookie, a kid. But, hopefully, like we've been saying, this will be a turning point for him, and he'll be better forever after this.
Yeah, and I think he can make a great point. And also, when he talks about seeing it in slow motion, what that tells me is he's thinking, and it sort of goes back to the yips thing we talked about. You've got to, what is it that Romeo said to Tin Cup? Your brain was getting in the way. And I wonder if Jerry Jeudy's brain is getting in the way because he's thinking about what he needs to do, and he needs to get to that point where instead of thinking about what he needs to do, he just does it. And that's something that maybe it's going to have to come after an off season of work. The other thing that kind of hits me in general is thinking for Jeudy and all the guys that are having tough years, that with COVID, everything you have to go through piled on top of it, I think these guys are really ready for the season to end. They just need a mental break for a while.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And the end of the season couldn't come any sooner. Drew Lock needs a clean slate. Now, will he get it? We'll talk about that here in a second. Jerry Jeudy needs a clean slate. It feels like everyone needs a clean slate. Vic Fangio needs a clean slate. I think there'll be a massive sense of relief in that locker room when this season's over, and it'll quickly turn into, anxiousness for next season, ready to get back out there and show what they could have been if it weren't for this, that, or the other thing this season.
So it said, Ryan, Drew Lock. Mace, what did Vic Fangio have to say about Drew Lock's performance? And where did you think his performance tipped the scales today? Ryan said for him, it didn't move the scales at all. For me, a kind of a tiny step backward for Drew. So how was he in your eyes, and what did Vic have to say?
Yeah, I don't think it was a step forward. I think, if anything, a little bit of a step backward. Now, the thing that Vic mentioned, he talked about things that need to be done better, and he mentioned tackling. He mentioned drop passes. He also mentioned that, and he came back to it a couple of times, that you can't have turnovers like that in the red zone. And that's the thing. It was obviously a frustrating moment. I mean, that's one where you've got to see coverage, you've got to see all the guys that are in front of you, and maybe just eat the ball, take the sack, or get it away, and at least give yourselves a chance for a field goal. So I think Vic was very unhappy about the decision that Drew Lock made there in that red zone situation, and unfortunately, just in terms of evaluating Drew Lock, when the coaches see moments like that, they're accumulating that on top of what's been seen before, and you start wondering, okay, is it really getting any better here? Even though you can look at the rest of the game and you can look at the drops and say a bunch of it isn't on Drew Lock, but that one was, and in the coach's minds, they view that as a play that took 3 points off the board. So Vic appeared really unhappy about the decision that Drew made there when he was throwing to his left, and unfortunately, in this sum for the Broncos right now, because turnovers have been such a problem for the team, such a problem for Drew Lock, that thing is it's going to be the banner headline that they have internally for what Drew Lock did today.
So something happened today, kind of. Some news, I'm not even going to say broke today, but was fortified a little bit by Adam Schefter this morning. Early in the wee hours of the morning, Schefter puts out that Vic Fangio will be back in 2021. Ben Albright's been saying that for a while now. We've been saying it on this show that we don't think he's going anywhere. So, like I said, not really breaking news, but news nonetheless when it comes from Adam Schefter. And I think for me, it's the first step in a word that we are going to hear ad nauseum this offseason. I think we're going to hear it at the postseason press conference. I think you're going to hear it on this show more than you want to. And you probably already have. And the word is continuity. And I think this is the first step. And when they talk about Pat Shurmur, you're going to hear the word continuity. And when John Elway talks about why they brought back Vic Fangio, you're going to hear the word continuity. And when John Elway talks about how they're rolling with Drew Lock next year, you're going to hear about continuity. I think that is going to be the word of the offseason. And if it works out, no one's going to talk about it. And if it doesn't work out next season, it's going to become, a caricature of itself. Oh, look how great continuity is. With Drew, I think he's the last piece of that puzzle. He is if you ask John Elway as he delivers that message, which I'm just guessing he'll deliver at some point, who are you most confident in when it comes to this continuity? I think Drew Lock will probably be in last place. And so I think if a better opportunity at quarterback readily presents itself to the Broncos, I think they'll approach it. If Matt Stafford is on the trade block, I think the Broncos will explore it. Matt Ryan, same story. But I think in general, especially when it comes to the draft, I think that the Broncos, if none of those things come across their desk, will be rolling forward with Drew Lock and talking about that word continuity more than anyone wants to hear it.
I think John Elway is going to try to do everything to get himself Matt Stafford, because Vic is now going to be on the hot seat next year. John may be on the hot seat depending on the ownership situation. And I don't think Vic wants to think about the offense anymore. He wants to do what he's doing on the defense. And you know what? He's done a good job of that sometimes this season, including today. I think he doesn't want to worry about the offense when they're in the red zone and potentially throwing a pick to take points off the board. So I think with Vic coming back, I got to think that gives him even more control of what's going to happen with the quarterback position this year, guys. So I think, Ryan, if Matt Stafford's available, man, I think they're really going to try to do everything they can to get him.
And that's kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree with you, Zach. And I think that's the one possibility that I think could cause a change at the top of the depth chart as far as the quarterback position goes. But if he's not there, if whoever the GM is in Detroit says, we're rolling with Matt Stafford, this is our best possibility, we can't get somebody better in the draft, then what do you think Vic is looking for? Because for me, I think if Vic is looking for a backstop, a hedge on Drew Lock, I think he's looking for the guy that won't make that mistake, that when you have third down in the red zone, won't try to jam it in there to a hole that doesn't exist, and instead will just throw it away or take the 2-yard scramble and allow the team to kick a field goal. And so when you look at quarterbacks that don't make huge mistakes, that are hedge types, that means even though we bring him up from time to time, and I think he's going to have something, maybe less the Marcus or less the Jameis Winston category and more the Marcus Mariota or Tyrod Taylor category, maybe not even the Ryan Fitzpatrick category, because Fitz, sometimes he doesn't know his limitations and will make some dumb plays. You don't expect that from a Harvard guy, but being smart doesn't mean you don't necessarily do dumb things on the field from time to time. And Fitz is kind of too much of the high risk, high reward guy. And I think if Vic would really, if he brings in a backstop on Drew Lock, it's going to be someone who doesn't make mistakes and can kind of pair with what he's got. So I think they'd be looking at that Tyrod Taylor, Marcus Mariota class of quarterbacks.
Yeah. Tyrod Taylor was the name that jumped out at me right when you started describing that. He's a guy who doesn't score a lot of touchdowns, but he also doesn't put the ball in harm's way. And the fact that he doesn't put up a lot of touchdowns is the reason why he's not a starter in this league. But the fact that he doesn't turn the ball over is the reason why he's going to have a job until he decides he doesn't want to have a job anymore. So that would be a great option. I'd be all about it.
And, when you were going through that list, Mason, and I totally agree with everything you said, but I was instantly taking Ryan Fitzmagic, who's a backup yet like a fourth quarter reliever that wins games for them. I guess he didn't against the Broncos, though. And I was also taking Mitchell Trubisky very quickly off that list as he threw into like half of the Jaguars covering a receiver today in the end zone. So I think that would be a sigh of relief for Broncos fans.
And the thing is, now Mitchell Trubisky is playing his way into the conversation of being a Chicago Bear anyway in 2021, as they sit there now with a playoff spot in their own hands in Week 17 if Mitchell doesn't drop the ball metaphorically or literally next week. So that one might be off the table anyway.
Crazy. I mean, I'm a believer, or maybe not a big believer, but I have belief that Mitch Trubisky is a Tannehill candidate, just not in Chicago. Like, you have to be relieved of the place where all those expectations were put on you in the first place, and you can just kind of go be you somewhere else. Mitchell Trubisky is, in my opinion, never going to become that guy in Chicago. While I do think if he were to go somewhere else and get a fresh start, he might have a chance to be the next Tannehill.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, good conversation. I feel better. I don't know about you guys, the listeners, but I think there's a lot to discuss from this game going forward. I think there's some positives. Like I said early in the show, maybe one day, long down the road, we're saying, thank God Jerry Jeudy dropped that pass, because you never know what one play like that, how much it can affect. Shelby Harris, knocks down the ball last year, and we're still thinking about it. Although the Broncos probably, who knows what the Broncos would have done at 10. But we obviously weren't complaining about them getting Jerry Jeudy. Everything comes full circle.
No, Shelby Harris certainly tried today to bat his way down to a Broncos worst draft pick.
Goodness gracious. I cannot. Shelby Harris, maybe the best game I've ever seen him play.
He's having a fantastic season. I mean, holy cow. He bet on himself this year, and boy, is it looking good. Did he make the right decision to come back to Denver on a prove-it deal?
Well, yeah, of course. And he's having a son today, and I think that was why he had a little extra giddy up. Like, he had like legitimate Aaron Donald moments in this game where he was just bowling guys over at the line. I was so impressed with him, and I hope he comes back. I truly think he is your most valuable defensive weapon against Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert.
Yeah. He's an absolute beast, and maybe he shouldn't have had batted passes. He should have had sacks instead, because that would have kept the clock moving, and then he would have been able to get home to Denver with his wife a little quicker.
That is true. He kept stopping that damn clock.
He did, but those plays he made got the Broncos the ball back, and for much of the day, they were trying to run the ball. They especially early, trying to establish the run. So he knew the Broncos would try to chew more time than the Chargers, who I think this says it all for why the Chargers blow leads. They're sitting there in the fourth quarter with a double-digit lead, and they go 3 and out, and they only take 57 seconds off the clock. And you wonder why this team has blown lead after lead over the course of the year. They don't know how to handle that situation.
We did a Broncos roundtable not that long ago, and it kind of lives in infamy now because of how quickly it was deemed meaningless. Because the question was, you get to keep one long term, you get to tag one, and you have to let one go. And the 3 players were Garrett Bowles, Shelby Harris, and Justin Simmons. And at the time, I said, tag Bowles, sign Simmons, and let Shelby Harris go. And I did write in there, like, this is going to hurt, and I don't want to do it. I think I've changed my mind. Obviously, you already signed Garrett Bowles, but I think if it came down to me, you can only sign one of Shelby Harris and Justin Simmons. I might go Shelby Harris.
Woo. And Ryan, you would have something on your side to back you up, and that is Vic Fangio can really take any safety and take them a step or two above of what they are right now. And you can have Kareem Jackson here next year. You have a team option on him after this season, so you could keep a very good safety, and then maybe you have confidence in Trey Marshall. Maybe you say you're going to take a second-round safety and let Vic Fangio do his magic with him, but you don't want to let a guy who is like the best in the league at batting passes. And also, he's been very good in the run game, very good in the pass game and other aspects. So, yeah, I mean, you have backing to that.
Yeah, again, I would hate it. I don't want to let go of Justin Simmons. But there is a big part of me that says, man, that would be it would be really hard to let Shelby Harris go after what we've seen this year.
Is tagging him and then signing him a month later after DeMarcus Lawrence when he got the second tag, is that an option, or is it tag and that's it? Because if you can tag Justin but get it done a month from now, I'm going to have my cake and eat it too. The problem is, if the Broncos can't get something done with Justin quickly after they tag him, you're saying goodbye to him after next year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Hopefully they can bring both guys back. That would be the best case scenario, obviously. And we'll talk more about this during the week. We'll talk more about the future for Drew Lock and the rest of the coaching staff now that we know Vic Fangio's for sure safe. And we'll talk about this final matchup with the Oakland Raiders. So stick with us. Of course, we'll be live on Monday and Wednesday, and you can catch our show every single day wherever you listen to podcasts. If you watch us on YouTube, we'd love if you hit us with a thumbs up and maybe a subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're trying to add there. But regardless, thank you all for tuning in and have a great night.